Testing. Can you hear me good? Okay. I think I'm going to step down. Is that allowed? Okay. I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you. Give you a little introduction about what we've done on our farm and its location. There you can see that. Now that marker's barely working, isn't it? Yeah, there it is. There's the Mississippi River. There's Cairo, Illinois. There's the Ohio River. Here's the Tennessee River. That's Kentucky Lake. Here's the Cumberland River. That's Barkley Lake. This is Nashville, Memphis, and our farm's located right here, southwest of Murray, Kentucky. We're at the edge of the Luss wind-blown deposits. And then on the other side of these lakes in Kentucky, you start the limestone soils that Kentucky's famous for. Tell you a little bit about myself and my family. Have a wife, been married for 38 years, have a 33-year-old daughter who's a partner in a law firm in Nashville. She's married to a Tennessee state attorney. I have a daughter who's a nurse, and she is married to a social services guy that runs a home for boys. And they have 2 sons. I have 2 grandsons. And I have a daughter that is my entrepreneur, and she's coming into the farming operation. She's doing our bookkeeping, and her husband is in the Marines 4 years, and then came out of the Marines, got an environmental engineering degree from Murray State University, and now he's helping me run the business on the farm. Years ago, we started a software company in 1998, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. And that company has grown to 37 employees, so my time gets pretty busy with the software business. I've had the blessing to travel all over the United States and see production agriculture everywhere. Our soils in Callaway County, here's sort of an image that I found in a creek bed cutout. There you've got your Luss layer over coastal plain sediment. We're at an elevation of 560 feet. We have annual rainfall of 40 to 60 inches. Imagine what that Luss soil does with the intense rain and 5-6 inch rain. It literally washes away. Tell you a little bit about how we got into conservation and farming. My father left the farm. He went in right as World War II ended. On the GI Bill, went to the University of Wisconsin, got his PhD in soil science. And when I was 7 years old, he came home and he told my mother that, how do you feel about going to Brazil? And so moved the family to Brazil. So I grew up in Brazil, grew up in Indonesia, came back to the United States when I was a senior in high school. So I got a chance to see agriculture everywhere. When we returned to the United States in '73, he purchased a farm, 180-acre tract, for $193. And everybody laughed at him because it was gully erosion and wore out. But his vision was that was going to be his retirement farm. You know, he could look out the window at the cattle when he retired from the university. And our family was heavily influenced by years of global travel, and I'm going to show some things in a minute. We saw so much around the world with soil erosion, water quality, farmers that were struggling. And as we saw them restore their systems, we saw the beauty of what can happen. Ponderosa Farms today, it was started in 1978, and currently we're 1,200 acres of corn, wheat, and double crop beans. And then we run about 300,000 head of livestock, catfish. Okay. So we added the fish as a sort of an alternate crop, and I'm going to go into some details on that. So the journey starts in 1964 when my dad, who's on the left, takes a team of scientists down to work in the state of Rio Grande do Sul, which is the southernmost state in Brazil. And it was a pretty interesting deal. President Kennedy made a trade where he sold Brazil wheat and threw in some scientists as a bonus if they'd pay him. So that's what my dad got involved with. It's called the Wheat 480 program. And so he was down there offering right there technical service to the agriculture, the grower. That's what that says in Portuguese. What ended up happening is their quest to know more about the soils of Rio Grande do Sul is they sampled and probed until farmers said, you guys have made my field look like armadillos have been out there. And so they called it Operation Armadillo. And it became famous for that reclamation of Brazilian agriculture. The things that we saw, and you can imagine just the blessing of having a father tell me to get in the Jeep with him. And I've traveled all over Brazil. There's hardly a place in Brazil I haven't put my foot on. And we got to see all sorts of agriculture. And this is what happened in this state. If you zoom in into the western part of the state of Rio Grande do Sul on Google sometime, just look at the farmland now. It's awesome, okay? But when we got there, this area had been heavily colonized by Germans and Italians that escaped Germany and Italy before World War II started. They saw the crap coming, and they said, we're getting out of here, and they went to southern Brazil. A similar climate to their climate. And what happened, they got there, they intensively tillaged and farmed, washed away. The soils have a natural pH of 4.5, and it wasn't long till it wasn't growing anything. And this is what happens when you remove all the fertility of that alta soil, and you end up with a weed called barba de bode, which means goat's beard. And it's a noxious weed, and you can't do anything with it. It's noxious to cattle. So that's what the landscape had become in 1964. So they went in there with gully erosion, those kind of erosion practices. They went in there with corrective pH. And then Brazil is one of those leaders in no-till as well as cover crops. And in 2014, I got to travel with my dad back to Brazil on the 50th anniversary of the project, and they gave him honorary PhD, and we traveled around Brazil and we looked at this farmland, same area that I was showing you in the previous pictures. That land right now, that's a cover crop with some volunteer soybeans. This is in May of 14. The soybeans have been harvested, just a couple of little volunteers coming up. And that land trades now like Iowa farmland, okay? Starving to death, super productive, and Brazil's our biggest competitor in beans. One of the really neat things about this trip is it happened in May, and we're covered up on the farm, but I told my wife I'm going to take these 10 days off. My dad's 87. It doesn't matter what's going on. I'm going to go spend these 10 days with him in Brazil. And so we went out in the field, and it's very interesting when you have PhD soil scientists in Brazil say, I got my PhD from this man who got his PhD from your father. And that lineage was very, very important to them. But what do these Brazilian scientists do when they get, soil scientists do when they get out in the field? They take this shovel, and that little man right there, in just a matter of minutes, dug a 4-foot hole, and we were looking at the soil profile, okay? I was talking to a couple growers last night about this. This is a shovel that's shaped about like that, and it's got a long steel shank, and this long, hard wood, this is harder than oak, long pole there, and that's what the farmhands use to go dig up armadillos. Okay, you can imagine what an armadillo heel does to a bean header, right? So they picked up that tool, and it wasn't very long till we were actually looking at that soil tilth. This is a huge no-till area in Brazil now. Okay, so you see how we're seeing those things. We understand because of sort of the family background of education that you got to talk to people about this stuff. You got to get them out in the field. You got to dig a hole. You got to show them what's going on in the ground. So then my dad got called back to Brazil to go to the capital of Brasilia, and this is 1970, and he worked in this 8th building, which is the Ministry of Agriculture. This is the capital of Brazil. It was started in 1960. There wasn't a person there. They started building the city. A famous architect laid it out. If you look at it on Google, it's shaped like an airplane. The pilot's cabin of the body of the plane is the Senate and the House of Representatives and the executive branch. Okay? So this is a completely planned out city in the middle of nowhere. And the president had a claim that we're going to unleash the great giant, which is Brazil. And by moving the capital to the interior of the country, he moved all those people to the interior, and then the Cerrado region, which is where the big production area in Brazil is, opened up. Okay? So then we moved to Indonesia. And so you can imagine this boy growing up. I'm now 15, 16 years old. And when I'm spending my spare time, I'm running through the paddy fields close to to where our house is. And this is a painting, but very representative of what the image was like there then. And you see these fields that have been farmed for thousands of years on these rich volcanic soils. And you can see the care that they're taking to let the water down each one of those terraces. And if you don't think that's intensive farming, you just need to go look at it. And on the mountainsides, there would be tea plantations grown in terraces around the sides of the mountains. The island of Java in Indonesia is 50,000 square miles. The state of Kentucky is 40,000 square miles. So the island of Java is about 25% bigger than the state of Kentucky. In the state of Kentucky, there are 4 million people. On the island of Java, there's 141 million people. Okay? When you go there and you walk away, you go, where's all the people? Because I'm telling you, it's solid people. But you know what? They're self-sufficient in food, and they're in this tropical paradise of volcanic soils and a climate that's just unbelievable. So we get back to Kentucky, and my dad bought this retirement farm, and I decided I'm going to go down and spend my summers while I'm getting my degree in soils at the University of Wisconsin, work for my uncle, and I'm going to get rich farming. And I'm still working on that. I've had a rich life, but it just takes lots of time, doesn't it? So we started our no-till farming journey really in '76. We started an NRCS long-term agreement in 1980. When we got to these farms, they were all heavily eroded. The people that had them before, we bought them, they'd gone broke. And we had to deal with gully erosion first. And then the no-till systems came in and helped us with the sheet erosion. But we pretty much wanted to take care of that first. And we sort of did something that I think was unique. We actually put a budget, $1 per acre per year, that we wanted to spend on conservation practices. We took this amount of money, we put it in a pot, and if we could get the government to match us at NRCS, we would, or we'd go do it ourselves. Okay? So one thing that I said in a session yesterday, that this 78 to 2017, about 1981, my grandfather came over to me, and I was farming all on my own, but he still was, counseling me. And he said, you want too much too quick. You need to slow down. You need to build long-term plans. You can't do this all at once. You're going to go broke if you keep doing what you're doing. And as an eager young man that was going to conquer the world, I didn't think that way. And so what he helped me do, he helped me look at long-term planning. And when it comes to these no-till systems, when it comes to the way we farm, when it comes to the way we irrigate, anything we're doing in these lifelong investments, it takes time to implement. So be patient and start building long-term plans. So, living the dream. 1979, we took a 180-acre farm that was paid for. We used that as collateral to buy a whopping $22,000 worth of equipment. Got a combine, a truck, a tractor, and a planter. $22,000, okay? And most people would say that that's not much of a combine, but it did the job, right? So there's my fiance at that time. We were getting ready to get married in November. This is probably September. And we started farming. So what did we run into? 78 was a dry year. 1980 was horrible in Western Kentucky. Had a whole couple weeks of 106-degree weather right when corn was pollinating. Carter put on the grain embargo, or wheat that we had in the bin went down. What happened to interest rates in 1979 and 80? Skyrocketed. So you young guys that have never seen that, you're blessed. So we had bought a 155-acre farm on a land contract at 9%. So that's the only reason we were able to keep it. Because if it had been on the bank mortgage variable rate, it killed us. So all of a sudden, 81 comes along. We got a great wheat crop. We go buy a new combine. This is a brand new John Deere combine, 15-foot header, delivered to the farm, $64,000. My MacDon header that I bought this year for my combine cost more than that whole machine did. Okay, so I'm throwing these numbers out for especially for some of the younger folks to understand this change. Things changed a lot. That combine and a header now is $400,000 or $500,000, new one. So the no-till systems in '76, we experiment first with no-till soybeans after wheat on my uncle's farm. My uncle kept telling me that no-till corn is not farming. And he said, that is not growing corn. And so in 1984, after the drought of 1983, I have a farm that has a field you can't see from the road, and I no-tilled it. And I didn't tell him. And I kept it a secret. And that fall, I said, Uncle Billy, I said, I really got some good news to share with you. I said, my best field was a no-till cornfield. And he said, son, do you think I don't know that? He said, I have walked that field all summer long. He said, it's beautiful. We're going to have no-till corn next year, too. So 1999, we start looking at ryegrass. Where we don't have wheat in our rotation, we start going to ryegrass. We're doing no-till corn after wheat. I'm going to show you some numbers on that. We actually had Sarah Gahant, the ASR for Kentucky and Tennessee, call me and said, would you do a stupid trial that nobody else would do? And we planted corn, no-till after wheat. And I'm going to show you the numbers on that in a minute. And then we're looking at now getting into a never-till rotation. And when I talk a little bit about irrigation, now if it's too wet, we can wait. Because if we have to delay planting and we have irrigation, we can sort of compensate for that fear of planting late. If it's dry, we can plant and water it up. So it's changing the way we run our business. This is 1989, and because on the farm we're bringing our international connections, we're bringing people to the farm all the time. And what are we talking about? We're talking about no-till farming. We're talking about how we're getting it done in the field. There was a whole group of Brazilian agricultural leaders and farmers that came to the United States. And my dad brought them out, and one of the farmers said, quantos peões que o Rick tem para gerenciar a fazenda? And he said, how many peons does Rick have to run the farm? And my dad said, o Rick é o peão. Rick is the peon. So this is Dan Quayle in the middle, if you don't recognize him. He was the Vice President of the United States. Me and my wife are both 33 years old in that picture. And we received that award because we combined not only practices in the field, but education with all those we could get drug out to the farm. We have people from Kenya, people from Nigeria, we had the Ministry of Agriculture from Indonesia come to our farm. We had Brazilians. We had middle school, high schools, anything we could do to get kids out there, get people out there, talk about what we're doing on the farm, we felt was very important. okay? Now, my wife is still gorgeous and beautiful. I, however, look more like an old bull with a grass belly. So 1998, me and another guy started a software company, Ag Connections, and we landed a contract to launch some products in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. A Palisade, which was a growth regulator that Novartis had then, which is now Syngenta. And we're going out there and we're managing to launch products with yield monitors, test strips, weigh wagons. We even did variable rate application in the Willamette Valley, in the South Valley. There's some poorly drained soils. And if you spray a growth regulator where you have water suppression and problems, then you just have weeds pop up. So what we wanted was good soil, spray the growth regulator on perennial ryegrass, bad wet spots, turn the machine off. So we were doing some of that stuff. So I came home after my great friends in the Willamette Valley in Oregon talked me into growing annual ryegrass as a cover crop in 1999. And I could have walked around the court square in Murray, Kentucky, buck naked twice at lunchtime and caused less controversy than me doing that. Okay? I'm telling you, my neighbors, they wanted to have, what do you call it when you have an intervention? They wanted to have an intervention and call me out and go, have you lost your mind? We were a wheat growing area then, we're not as much now. And ryegrass was a weed in wheat. And they were afraid I was bringing in all this seed that was going to just ruin the wheat cropping in Callaway County. And there was no control for it. There was a product called Holon, which was the same as not spraying. And then in 2005 or 6, Syngenta came out with a product called Axial that could get ryegrass out of wheat. So we started looking at that, and of course, if we're going to look at it, let's measure it, right? Because we're wanting to know our numbers. And so that's what this field looked like 70 days after seeding. We eventually went from tillage to no-till. After the corn was harvested, we'd no-till the ryegrass right into the corn stalks. But look at that cover. Where we have lots of rains in western Kentucky, that stuff held the ground. And sure enough, we came in with our yield monitor data and we plotted all of our fields. This field was one of our average fields on the farm, but it was our highest yielding soybeans in 2000. So we're looking at our data. We're making decisions over what's making money and not making money. So then we get into diversification and we think, what can we do? What are our problems on the farm we're trying to solve? We've worked on this conservation stuff. We've worked on our no-till. We keep having a problem with going to the bank and saying, hey, I'm really confident in my farming methods as long as I'm farming with your money, And we had to figure out a way to deal with water. So we slowly grew into irrigation. We used hard hoses first, and then we decided to lay out our catfish ponds. And we got into catfish production, and we slowly grew our ponds to 10 5-acre ponds, okay? And so this is a picture here of our crew harvesting. You take a seine, you put it on both sides of the pond, you drive 2 tractors down through it. The seine has a hydraulic reel on it that rolls the seine up. The seine comes down to a corral door that goes into a live car. The fish go into the live car, and then 2 guys get down in the water and they hand dip fish into this boom truck. The boom truck then moves the fish over to the live haul truck, okay? So we've been able to create a business where we sell catfish to pay lakes, where someone pays to fish. So we give them nice 2-3 pound stockers, and they come pick them up at our pond bank. They write us a check for the fish. There's no accounts receivable. And they deliver them to pay lakes around Cincinnati, Louisville, Lexington, and up into Illinois and Indiana. And we sell about 170,000 pounds of fish a year. And this business of getting in the pond with the fish, one of my employees says this is like riding a bull. Not everybody wants to do it. You know? So through the construction of the ponds, and they're all located, there's 15 acres, there's another 15 acres, there's another 5 acres, and here's another 15 acres. So through the construction of these ponds, we then plumb that to pivots. And now we can really make a big difference in our no-till environment when we run into our dry spells. We were shooting water on it. In the drought of 2012, we had one field, of course it quit raining in April in 2012 and didn't rain again until late. And it took 4.5 inches of water to grow that crop and grow 200 bushel corn. So it doesn't take a lot of water if it's properly applied. If you've got that no-till environment where you've got soil structure and that soil has got that water holding capacity, and then you supplement and add what it needs, and it doesn't take as much water as I thought it would when we put these systems in. Again, this is a long-term plan. We sat down with software and we mapped out where we wanted to be long-term, and we said this is our goal for years out. We're going to do it piece at a time because that's the way you pay for things as you go, and that served us well. Then we get to do some crazy stuff, and because now we have water, in 2013 we were asked to do a pivot. We want you to harvest the wheat, then we want you to plant half of the field to beans and the other half to corn. So at the bottom there, we're planting corn on June the 12th, and we planted the soybeans on June the 14th. And so we're just trying to see what we can do. What could we do if corn was over $8 again and beans weren't that high in that ratio of beans to corn? What could we do? And you can see here in the zoomed up view, in our software, LandDB, that we have through Ag Connections and the AgReg offer, we try to build a farm management system that lets a grower, a farm manager who may not have access to accounting, but he's managing the farm, he's responsible for the crop, take the gross revenue of sales, subtract the variable cost, and then you get the contribution margin. And contribution margin is the amount of money you use to pay your fixed cost, okay? And as we work with big farms all over the United States, and we currently have 50% of the potato acres in the United States run our software. And we really focused on knowing your numbers, measure what you're doing, know your numbers. And a farm manager who may not have access to the accounting and the lawyers, they're responsible for the crop, the inventory, the ins and outs. The software allows them to manage that business and allows them to hand over the money, the contribution margin, to pay fixed cost to the owners of the farm, okay? So in these kind of scenarios, we can quickly compare what our profitability is, and 201 above variable, 519 all in 1 year, or 516, we're pretty good, and look at those yields and look at those prices, okay? So when we're farming like that, we can make money, right? So then if we're going to be variable rate planting and we start understanding our soils and we start understanding productivity, you know, the early days of precision ag, they didn't want a field that looked like that. They wanted the whole field to be green. Well, any soil scientist knows that some soils are not as productive as others, and what you want to do is get the most out of that certain soil type that you can. There you see a soils map over a multi-year yield map, and you see this is the best soil type in the field, this is the second best, and you can already see the influence of the pivot in that field. This right here is a lot of wildlife damage that I'm going to talk about in a minute. And so what we did is we went out here and we built our variable rate planting maps, and we put in, this is with a partnership integration to Premier Crop Systems out of Iowa. We put in our learning blocks that allow us to set, hey, I'm comfortable in this field planting 35,000 kernels, but I'd really like to see what 38 or 39 would do. What would 42 look like? So we can sacrifice an acre or two in the field. We load it in the planter executes it. It's pretty cool to be going across the field, all of you that are using variable rate planting, and see those population planting rates go up as you get into your, your good soils. And then we can come back after we harvest, and we can actually, I don't know, it's hard to see there, we can actually check how much money we made. So if 1,000 kernels of seed corn cost what? $3, okay? So if I add 4,000 population, I'm spending $12 more acre. Here, my yield difference between my learning block and outside was 7 bushels. Let me use 4 for easy math, 28. I spent 12, I got 28 back, okay? And what these kind of technologies allow people to do is, as they're farming, start fine-tuning their recommendations. Start fine-tuning where they're going to put what on the farm. Over here on this second learning block, which this is the real sweet spot in the field, we increased the population 4,000 kernels, but we increased the yield 15 bushels. So we spent $12, we got 60 back, okay? I feel comfortable doing these things because I got a pivot going on the top of it. So use these technologies to measure what you're doing so that you can make better informed decisions in the future. Then we get into the cost per bushel map. So in these green areas here, it's costing me $1.50 to $1.70 to grow that corn. This is variable cost, okay? Down here in the red, it's costing me $2.33 to $5.75, okay? And that's wildlife damage right there. And then what we can do, because we have this in a spatial engine, we can look at our lows in the field for our pH ranges down to our high, and look at the same yield in those same spatial regions. And we can do what? We can start looking for what is our limiting factor, okay? And we're seeing that our highest yields are in our lowest pH range. Of course, 6.7 to 7.2 is all excellent. Here on our phosphorus ranges is 13, all the way up to 62. And our yields are pretty much not affected by that. We probably got way too much phosphorus in this field. We can look at these different attributes and start really looking for what's causing my limiting factor on this field. In our software LandDB, we track every single application record. And you can see here that we're spoon feeding the crop. We're going to make a lot of changes this year. We're going to take out this anhydrous, and we bought a variable rate nitrogen rig that follows our planter, 16 row. And we're going to, inside the pivot, we're going to put less, and the dry corners we'll put more to manage that crop outside the corners. And then spoon feed through the pivot. So here you see we're putting some 32 on June 15th. That's probably right at tasseling. And July 13th, we put some more 32 because we got a bunch of big rains, okay? The pivots help us put fertilizer on the field, and it's pretty easy and efficient to do. Once again, what the software does is let you see every line item application, what that cost you per acre, what the total cost is, how much product, what the rate was, and those records are sitting there helping you know what your field history is. Well, that really is showing up bad. We also did an integration to Field to Market, which is a consortium of 200 ag companies that are trying to do some sustainability measurements. And so on one of my fields, I was trying to show you here, but all of the attributes that compare this field that was selected with the production practices compared to the state, okay? Plus 98% more land use efficient than the rest of the state, plus 99 on soil conservation, plus 61 on carbon, plus 94 on water use, plus 18 on energy, and plus 1 on greenhouse gases. And that's probably because of our high rates of nitrogen that we put on to grow this. And so what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to keep fine-tuning, as we've been discussing, this whole business of where we put our fertility and when we put it on. Another thing that when you're planning, when you're trying to go out and execute a plan, you've got to watch how much you spend after you planned it. And so what we do in our software is we have the ability to track here's our plan in blue for crop protection. There's what we actually spent in green. We were 111% of budget. On fertilizer, we were 103. On seed, we were 103. On services, we were 64. And we can see our percent of plan. And then when the revenue comes into the software, it automatically calculates out our plan revenue and our percent of plan on a revenue. Okay? So when you're, sort of what we're doing on the software side for measurements is if the grower enters the data, then we need to automate these tables and pie charts so that they can click on it and they can say, I'm on budget, I'm off budget, why did I get off budget, and what's going on. One thing that I've really been blessed with in my life is I've had several people that have mentored me in ways that I just hope I do the same for others, okay? Part of my encouragement today is around know your numbers and education. I had a father who taught me about life, who taught me about God, who taught me how to work hard and how to care for others. I had an uncle who taught me how to farm. Because my dad was off traveling to Indonesia, and my uncle was right there, and he was my counselor. And then I had a grandfather who kept me pretty straight. I came into church late one morning, and he said, a young unmarried man is not to ever come in church late. I said, never happen again, sir. So then I had another guy, a neighbor who, same age as my dad, Mr. West. When his son got sort of sick of farming in the early 90s, he quit, went back and got his doctorate degree, and he's he's a physical therapist. And so he left the farm, and that had me and Mr. West had been swapping work, and Mr. West said, let's just farm together. So we farmed together till he retired, and then I rented his land and bought up his equipment. And Mr. West gave me some sound advice. He said, son, he said, drive good equipment, because when it's all said and done, that's all you're going to get out of it. So what we've done here where we're at with our no-till program, we are now planting our wheat no-till with this drill. We're coming back in and planting our soybeans with this drill. This is my first year of planting 7.5-inch beans. I learned a lot. It's different than a conventional planter. I planted a little too wet and a little too deep, but I've after one season, my wife says I go through stress every time I get a new planter learning it. But we feel real comfortable with that planter now, and so we're on this goal to be continuous no-till. This is our corn planter. It's a 1631. We traded it for a 2150, which is 16 rows of corn only, trying to get that weight off the planter. And we'll plant the corn with that planter, and we'll plant the wheat and the beans with the other planter. And then the next is how I get back to my ryegrass. How I get back to my ryegrass in that rotation, and it's probably going to be putting it in the how do you go right to the end? Oh, I'll get right here. Putting that ryegrass in on the beans before they drop their leaves, or I might even start using that same drill to plant it in later. Okay, right there. Sort of what I want to finish up with. When I moved back to the farm in 1978, like I said, erosion, worked to death, unproductive. And if you saw a deer, it was a big deal. You went to the coffee store and you said, I saw a deer this morning, you know. And there was no such thing as a turkey, okay? And the game wardens started stocking those in '85, and now on our farm, we have abundant deer. This image was taken early one morning in September when the bucks all get in their little bachelor pad mode before they break out into their territory. They run in a little bachelor club for a while. It usually lasts a couple weeks. And I'd been seeing them. This is right at daylight. The sun's coming up back there in the east, and they thought they thought I couldn't see them, you know. And so I got that sun behind them. There were 10 there. You can only count 9, but I was trying to wait for the 10th one to get in that picture. And I sent that to Valley, and Valley tweeted it with their logo on it. So it's a nice picture. So wildlife, soils, hawks, all the activity that we got going on in our no-till soil, all of the fish that we have on our farm has drawn eagles. So now we've had nesting eagles on our farm for 5 years. So every day I get to see an eagle. And I can't put a price on that. We're in the restoration business of nature. And when we restore things to how they're supposed to be, I think that's what we're called to do. Not trying to impose my values on anybody, but if you believe that God created man in his image, inside us is a code that when we see his creation working like it should, we smile. So just like you were talking about all that thousands of organisms we don't even have defined, we don't know what they are. But when we stick our hands down that ground on a hot summer day and we pull that cover crop back, that cover off, and that ground is alive, what does it do to you? You smile, don't you? What? You smiling because of earthworms? What's wrong with you? Think about it. What makes you happy looking at dirt? It's because we as farmers recognize that we're restoring this ground to what it's supposed to be like, how it was designed, how it was engineered to work, right? So with that, thank you for your time.